I will keep this brief just in the interest of getting to the discussion. And I think the common theme that we've heard so far, which really reflects my concern with really what I've seen my entire adult life, is that we're moving in a direction of greater consolidation of power in the hands of a few. And it doesn't matter whether we're talking about peace with respect to foreign policy, or prosperity in terms of our economic system, or liberty in terms of our civil liberties. What we've seen over my lifetime, and what I've been increasingly concerned about in terms of the world we're going to leave for our children, is this idea that government continues to grow, it is continuing to appear unaccountable, and not responsive to the needs and the questions, and really not being a servant of the people. So my perspective initially was economics, and how I got into this, or how I got into thinking about this, was really an outgrowth of my leaving surgical residency to start a hospital software company. And in the process of starting and growing that business, I learned a couple things. The first is that I learned that it is actually extremely healthy to have an economy based upon free market capitalism, despite what's being spread and talked about out there today. What I mean by that is I discovered very quickly that my children would not eat unless we had really happy customers, unless hospitals really wanted, and they were so pleased with the product and the service that we were offering, wanted to not just give us money in exchange for that, but tell their friends about what a great job we were doing. It was an extremely virtuous cycle. But then as I got further along in exploring the way the broader economy worked, I began to realize that not everybody plays the game by the same rules. And oftentimes, instead of focusing on having happy, satisfied customers that voluntarily give you money in exchange for what you do, there are lots of companies that find it easier and more cost-effective, frankly, to go to Washington. And they use Washington as a tool to either build themselves into a position of competitive advantage or to kneecap their competitors. And it's quite a different dynamic once a company starts using the government as a tool as opposed to focusing on serving customers. And when you look at the consolidation of power that's occurring, it began to strike me over the past, certainly 8 years, that, gosh, the more I look at Washington, I'm not so sure I can distinguish between the government's interests and corporate interests. And indeed, if you look at the campaign finance reporting, if you look at what drives the political process, if you look at the lobbyists who are lining up outside of people's doors to ask for favors, why not? Why did Willie Sutton rob banks? It's where the money is, right? And we've gotten to this system where we see the medical industrial complex, which I experienced as a physician. I always thought it was so sad and ironic that the most important drug in the world is our food. It's the food we eat. It's literally what composes us. And in medical school, I didn't spend any time talking about nutrition, but you begin to realize that medicine kind of steers you in a direction of turning disease into a stream of recurring revenue for drug companies.
I thought you were going to say Viagra. That's
yeah, but we're dealing with symptoms, and we're treating symptoms. We've got a system of quote-unquote healthcare that's not really healthcare. It's kind of corporate care that's designed to profit those who have the best lobbyists. We've got systems of agriculture that aren't sustainable. We've got systems we've got an energy policy that's not sustainable. And I think what it really boiled down to for me was this sense that with this consolidation of power, with this movement to use government as a tool to control, not only are we suffering from the results of an irrational foreign policy, and we're suffering from the loss of civil liberties, we're suffering from an inability to create value for ourselves and in our own communities. And if you look, and I've been spending so much time on the campaign trail, most of it, honestly, has been focused on people for whom the current power grid is left behind. And when I spend time in East Durham or East Central Durham, I'm working with the folks in the various grassroots neighborhood organizing groups in Durham. These are people who know the system's broken because they're being held down with one hand and spoon-fed a subsistence level of living with the other hand. That's not good. And the system that's supposed to help is really a system that exists or is intentionally or not being used to keep those people who manage that system in power as opposed to really lifting people up. How did we get this way? And my underlying appreciation for what drives that process ultimately came to fruition in a thorough historical study of our money itself and our monetary policy itself. And I'll close with a simple observation, which I hope we'll follow up with in the discussion, which is that it is actually impossible to say that today we live in a free market economy. And by that I mean the most important substance in our economy, the most important commodity in our economy is our money itself. And what we have with our money is we don't have a free market. We have a legislated monopoly, right? The only thing that we as Americans consider to be money for the most part is the US dollar, Federal Reserve notes. And the creation and management of the Federal Reserve notes is really a monopoly that's been delegated to the Federal Reserve in our banking system. So we're absolutely dependent on the banking system for the most fundamental ingredient in our economy. So for people who have been decrying the current financial crisis as, well, this is the result of laissez-faire because you can't deregulate these things, they're exactly right. You can't deregulate these things. Because when you have a legislative monopoly, like the banks, you've got to regulate the heck out of it. And how would it work if we told Time Warner, okay, Time Warner, you've got a national cable monopoly, you go send your board of directors up to Washington and tell us what channels we're going to watch and how much we're going to pay. Would we want to regulate that? We have to. It's not a free market. We created a monopoly. Likewise with our money itself. So my fear and my concern, and one of the big reasons I'm running for Congress, is that if you look at the way money is used as a tool to control us, where we've gotten hooked into the system of credit and addicted to the system of credit that turns a world of literally natural abundance into a world of artificial scarcity where we're all grabbing for the buck to try to meet our monthly payments. It's toxic. And it's used as a tool of control. And it's so refreshing, though, as part of this campaign, to be able to go places in our community where people have figured out there's a different way to do business. You can go to the farmer's market in Carver every weekend, and you can see wealth that's being created out of the ground. You can see that there is a world of natural abundance. And my challenge to us as a community is to figure out and to learn and to think outside the box and realize that we can take our country back by taking our community back, by taking our district back, and recognizing that true wealth does not come on an umbilical cord from Washington. True wealth comes from what we are able to create within our communities by bringing our own talents, products, services, natural resources, and gifts in service to other people. I know that sounds ridiculously idealistic and probably the last thing you'd ever expect to hear from a Republican, but it's just the way that my experience of living has taught me makes sense. And I really do hope that as we get through and start unwinding some of these issues, we can talk some more about the conflicts of interest that our current system engenders and how we might move to a more sustainable future. Thank you.